role, based off of this data that you've seen, might orals play? Could they replace injections, or is it for certain patients? Like, what did you learn?
From the investor perspective, I think the biggest question they want to ask is how does this data translate into some of the purely obese phase 3 trials that's reading out in the fall. And so we kind of, did some digging in terms of the efficacy, which is the weight loss, and also the safety. And so we were a little bit so for type 2 diabetes, I think we were very, very bullish on the prospect, but I think we're a little bit more reserved on the obesity front for two reasons. One, the weight loss curve appears to have plateaued much earlier than some of the peptide drugs that we have out there. So another difference between diabetes trials and obesity trials is that usually diabetes trials are a little bit shorter. Usually reach equilibrium from the A1C perspective after 3 months, whereas you don't see a plateau, until well over a year for obesity trials, and that explains the difference in timing. But we do see that little early plateau in the diabetes population in terms of the weight loss from orforglipron relative to some of the peptides. So that's number one on the efficacy front. On the safety front, and you have to kind of find this information from the New England Journal of Medicine paper in the supplemental instruction. So usually when companies characterize some of the adverse events, two things really, is important. One is, the frequency and then severity over time. With peptide drugs, what we typically see is, you really have to just kind of endure through the titration period, and things will get better in terms of the frequency and severity of adverse events. They usually taper out over time. What we saw from orforglipron is that there is a degree of persistence over time. So looking at these charts that usually have like this histogram, instead of being kind of a, increasing in the beginning and then tapers out over time, you see basically kind of a rectangular box. And this is especially prominent for the nausea adverse event and also for the constipation adverse event. So those are two things that, as we kind of go into the third quarter as these trials read out, that those are kind of the two things I would be looking for.